I don't know if you're like me and you've raised some young adults and you're wonderful to see them off. There's shocking data, though, that the stickiness of our faith goes through a very rough time when young adults leave home. 2 out of 3 kids, it's a groundbreaking study on Canadian youth called Hemorrhaging Faith, find that they are leaving the church before adulthood. And our next guest, Logan Gates, has got some deep thinking about that. Logan, welcome to 100 Huntley Street. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
You work for a ministry that works on tackling the tough questions, Ravi Zacharias Ministries. And let's just start with the big doubts that young adults have. Okay, is God real? Does God even exist?
I think that is a great starting point question. Is God real, and then does it really matter? And I think for me, when I speak to a lot of young people, and I know from my own story, the writing of someone like C.S. Lewis was really helpful. He spoke about God being a bit like thinking about the existence of the sun. There's a sense in which we can know the sun is there because we can see it, we can feel the heat. But there's also a sense in which the existence of the sun, the light it provides, makes sense of the rest of the world that we see. And I think that's a great starting point to think about that question, does God exist, is to think about how do we make sense of a world we live in, a world where we believe in real concepts of right and wrong, we believe in things like human dignity, and I think also...
Let's unpack that a bit, the sun. You can feel it. You can feel its heat, you can obviously see its effects. Are you saying that God is that tangible?
I think so, but it can be the kind of thing that we grow up with the sun and we can take it for granted. And it's only when we start thinking hard about, well, actually, you know, what was going on there in that time in my life? Or how do I think about how we can maybe do science? How can I think about the way that the world is so beautiful? It's the sort of thing that once you get thinking, you realize, well, that's the sort of thing that, that needs explanation.
Okay, so let's keep going down this difficult thing, this difficult path of facing young adults' doubts. And I think this is a doubt that crosses all ages. Where is God when? ... The whole question of evil in the world. If there is a caregiving God, like a life-giving sun to the planet, why are we in such a mess?
I think that is perhaps the biggest question. And I think that the question of why are we in such a big mess, you know, I think in a sense that's something we all experience and know for sure is real. And I think that actually is a good clue to thinking about the possibility of a God. Because when you look at a religion or something like atheism, that would say actually the suffering we see in the world, that's just the natural consequence of the way things are. I think there's something in us that cries out and says, actually, no, there has to be something more. The world is not meant to be the way it is. And I think that from the Christian perspective, there's an explanation there for that God created the world, created human beings to be in relationship with Him. But in turning away from God, that's had a cosmic impact on the world, and it's not God's plan. Christians believe that Christ coming into the world is part of setting that right, first with our relationship with God, but ultimately Christians believe actually the big plan is that God cares about suffering. He's done something about it.
Okay, we could talk the whole half hour on the big, on that whole cosmic problem of evil, but you mentioned the big plan, that there's a plan. And I know as Christians that plan is sourced in the Bible, the Holy Scriptures of God. What do you say to the young adult who says, it's just another book?
Yeah, I think that's a big question, especially here in Canada, where you have many different religions, many different sacred books. What makes the Bible different and unique? And I think that some of this comes down to the question of the person of Jesus. You know, when we think about who Jesus was, if He really was the Son of God, if He really died, and if He really rose, that we need to take seriously what He has to say. We see that the way Jesus speaks about the Bible is in very high terms. He says, not a dot will be taken away. Scripture cannot be broken. And so that's why I think for me, when I'm speaking to someone who's skeptical about the Bible, often I want to ask the question first, what do you make of Jesus? What do you make of the claims He made about Himself? But then also, what do you make about the claims He's making about you and the state of your heart? And I think we find, as you start to read the Bible, you realize it's the kind of book that reads you back. And it reads things I know into my life. It knows the state of my heart better than I even know myself. And that's why I think the Bible, it has a historical basis, but a deeply personal one as well. It's a book unlike any other.
Okay, I love that. The Bible is a book that reads you back. Your generation, you're 27, Logan. Are you guys reading more on an app then on, and tell me how that happens. How does the Bible read you back?
Yes, I've heard a joke that we're now back to scrolling through Scripture on our iPhones.
It's great.
Exactly. Well, I think that in my generation and young people, I think that we are engaging with Scripture differently. It might be through an app or through media, listening to sermons online or that sort of thing. But I think that what is so amazing, it's this same orthodox faith that we've inherited from the thousands of years, the centuries before us, that is being passed down and that people are finding compelling. And I think what that should tell everyone, tell all of us is, if that was my story, was I saw people engaging with God in a way that was more than just a doctrine or an idea.
Yeah,
it was real.
Tell us about your story a bit, because even though you're now teaching this everywhere in university campuses, 19 years old, it had to connect for you personally. What happened in Nicaragua for you?
That's right. For me, it was a big experience in Nicaragua where I felt God brought something real to what had first just been an intellectual exploration. I had grown up in the church, and it was around the time in high school I began to ask, is this really real? How does this fit with my science class? How does this fit with other religions? And I began to really find that people had thought about these questions and there were answers. But for me, it took a time visiting Nicaragua, working with a church there. It was a time in my life when I had just had a big identity pillar. My running, I was hoping to run Division I track and field in university. And I had a knee injury that ended all that. And it was just in that vulnerable moment I was in when that struck me more than I thought it would. It really broke something down in me. I saw people who had a Christian faith. I'd called myself a Christian my whole life, and yet it was something real for them. They had their worth and identity planted in something that lasted. And I saw that they had something that I didn't have, and I knew that I wanted that. And for me, that's where it came together. I saw the Christian faith was really true, but also that it was real. And that it was real for me. I could know that.
I'm so glad that you are teaching big questions, okay? Big deal questions, actually, not just big ones, big deal questions, bigdealquestions.com. You tell us what a family, it's for teens, right? This is age 13 to 18. Come figure out your big deal questions about God. May 13th, Mississauga, Winnipeg as well in summer in July. What do you think a young teen will take away from bigdealquestions.com?
Well, the idea is we want to create a space where we welcome questions. I think the only reason you should be a Christian is because it's really true. But often I find that it was my case as well. You can grow up in the church and you can take it for granted that it's true, but suddenly at school you get challenged or you start thinking about, well, I heard about this, or what about another religion? And I think we want to create the space for students to ask their questions that really matter, though, that affect, not just some of these more intellectual questions, but really your life. What does it mean when I suffer? What does it mean when I have anxiety? Our heart for this one-day conference is that youth get the chance to ask those questions to our speaking team and hear meaningful answers.
Oh, bless you as you do that, Logan. Wow, great to have you with us. We'll keep talking. We're going to talk about Easter in a couple of weeks with you because we're getting ready for those big questions about the resurrection of Jesus. Bigdealquestions.com. Sign up for that event.